Welcome to Experience This. This is show 36, or if you like, season 2, episode 6. We have here today co-host Bruce.
Hey, thanks, Christian. Bruce Rosard here with Arrival, if you couldn't tell by looking above my head.
And special guest Stephen Oddo.
Hi, nice to see you. This is Stephen, president of Walks and Devour Tours at City Experiences.
Is this your third time on, Stephen? I know we've talked a lot of times.
Yeah, a lot of times, a lot of panels, a lot of events. I think, yeah,
A lot of
third
bar
time
crawls. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're coming up to the 4-year anniversary of our on arrival in Berlin, the first week
Oh my
of
gosh,
March
four-year anniversary
2020.
of that. Yeah.
That was
remember it
last week.
well. It feels like it was in another dimension, but
Yeah.
it really was.
So we've got a few stories I want to talk about today. A bit of a sort of news catch up, industry news catch up. One story I want to talk about is Rezdy, some changes at Rezdy, and well, there's been a lot of changes there over the last year, especially. I think we should talk about Viator. It's always an interesting subject. There's some things happened last week with the stockholders of Viator, or potential things happening. And then the last thing, which I should talk to Bruce about maybe, and you can join in if you like, Stephen, but the Hornblower news. So it's a big headline. I think Hornblower declared Chapter 11, which is not the same as Chapter 7, but the headline is always bankruptcy, right? So did you see that, Bruce, this week?
Yeah. I mean, I originally saw it on the Wall Street Journal, which I don't typically read, but that's where the story broke, at least as far as I knew. And I happened to be on the phone yesterday with you, Stephen, before I knew about it. So I don't know exactly when it broke. Then, of course, I texted you because even though you are the president of Walks and Devour, you're part of the Hornblower family. I wanted to get your perspective. And I know there's not a lot you can say about it necessarily, but there's probably some things you can say. So we'd love to get your perspective and, stop where you need to. And Christian and I can chime in from our perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, it's a very minimal impact for Walks and Devour. We're, operating at some of the best season we've ever had so far. Great year ahead. And, it's a restructuring operation where it's essentially an acquisition by a new private equity firm. So I think there's been a lot of great articles that come out about it. And I don't want to talk too much about it, but I do think that the overall, effect is a positive one. Some great capital infusion in the business and restructuring that'll set us up for success. All the great assets in Hornblower are running and doing well. And obviously, American Queen, the cruise company that is being wound down, is a shame. That was really a well-loved business, and tons of guests have taken it over the years. And so, sad to see that go, but bright future ahead at the group.
That's
Yeah,
good
I mean,
to know.
Hornblower has a lot of brands, right? And one fell down with American Queen. That was it. All the other brands are alive and well, business as usual.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Operating today, sailing. We're running our tours all over the world, and it's just the timing is it had to happen. It's been a difficult environment for certain businesses, and this overnight cruise business was affected by the pandemic in a way that you just
Now,
couldn't.
that was ultimately the casualty of this restructuring. I know Anchor, also a very important company,
Yeah.
to Hornblower, is 100% good. Actually, I think I was told they're on a separate P&L and not really related overall. So they're in good shape as well, profitable. I'm sure Walks and
Yeah.
Devour are profitable. Yeah.
Great business, great product. We use it. It's growing and prospering. So all the great divisions you mentioned, all the great brands, Statue Cruises, Niagara, Alcatraz, Walks and Devour, Venture Shore, Anchor, everything running, doing great things. So it's going to be a big year for us, and we're seeing huge demand already for our tours in Europe and North America, of course, waking up as well. So we've got some new markets. We're launching some new destinations this year. We've already launched 10 new tours as well. So for us, it's onward and upward.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned Alcatraz, Stephen. As long as Alcatraz is still operating, I'm okay. So
You can see it out your window, right?
pretty much. Yeah, every time there's a government shutdown, the biggest thing is I'm always checking to see if Alcatraz is still going to be okay. They don't usually tell us until like morning of, but anyway, it's been okay for a while. So that's good news to hear that everything's stable your side. It seems like private equity is going to be the theme of today. It's probably not the most familiar subject for a lot of people, but I think you're really familiar with it, Stephen. So the next private equity,
I want to just say one thing that it's
yeah,
not bankruptcy is a scary word when you read about bankruptcy, but the fact is there's Chapter 11 bankruptcy reorganization, which is what happened here, where it's people, shareholders and the debt holders, it's in their world, not really in the operations if it's handled well. Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you're out of business. That's a whole different thing, and that's not what's going on here. It's Chapter 11. One division gets sold off. I think you got $300 million from Deutsche Bank come in. It's really just a reorganization of debt and the company and business as usual. So I just think that bankruptcy word is scary, and I just wanted to point that out.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the next private equity story to talk about is the Rezdy. So we spoke about Rezdy last year. There was the roll up, right? The Rezdy, Checkfront, Regiondo, three companies
Oh
all
yeah.
ended up in the same deal. Private equity company from New York. Couple of things. One, and this wasn't well publicized, but Lawrence Hester, the founder of Fareharbor, is a funder and a partner of that private equity firm. So I'm not sure if him and I'm not sure if others in the family are involved, but he's involved in, well, in Rezdy now and Checkfront, and maybe not directly operationally. The other thing that hasn't been announced, and I don't think anyone's talking about it, but Chris Atkin is no longer there as CEO, and two others. I've forgotten Mark's last name, but Susan Debatis as
Mark
well as.
Holder, who was the COO of Checkfront, is now out. Obviously, Jason, the
Jason.
CEO of Checkfront, left a while ago. Grant, one of the co-founders, out. So none of the senior execs from Checkfront are left, nor Rezdy. Not sure about Regiondo. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Oliver.
Yeah,
yeah.
so a lot of changes and there's been no announcement. So this I talked to a lot of people as you guys do, and I'm hearing this from staff, and it's a lot of rumors as well right now. When there's no formal announcement, rumors tend to spread. I don't know how much
What
you
is
guys
the
have heard
rumor?
about this,
What
or
do you think the goal is with that? I mean, that's a big change. A lot of change.
well, and this is part of I wanted your perspective on this, Stephen, because you hear horror stories about private equity, or I do, and that's generally people's first reaction. And I'm not blaming the private equity. I think it's just the way these models work. It's kind of a spreadsheet, and that's what you get. So when I first heard about the deal, Rezdy, which was last June, I think it came out at Arrival, right, Bruce, in
In
Bangkok.
Bangkok. Yep.
That was the day it was announced, the deal. Obviously, they've been working on it for a long time. Um, there's an assumption that they're going to bring the three businesses together and there'll be people let go and there'll be
Sure.
things trimmed. And often it's the senior leadership who
We can't
are
have three CEOs if you're merging the business
But you
together, and
should have one.
one is good.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think we agree that at least for now it seems that Oliver Rejondo is in, and or they may bring someone from the outside. You mentioned somebody.
Well, the
Uh,
new CEO of Rezdy is
oh,
from
okay.
Fareharbor. He was the chief product officer for Fareharbor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
Well,
that's
that's so maybe the connection between the
That's
Hesters is
really
closer than
super interesting, right? Like,
yeah.
is there a connection there with Lawrence and Mark Lowe, the ex Fareharbor product manager or product developer, chief product officer was his title, and Rezdy? I think we might need to.
Well, I
Total
mean, well,
coincidence.
there is a connection. It's there. I don't think anybody's hiding that. I
Yeah,
think it's actually interesting because obviously they see potential. I mean,
Yeah.
Rezdy, the original founder left when Chris Atkin came in. I think there were maybe a couple dozen employees at that point. I
Mm.
think it's somewhere up to 150, 200 employees right now. They sold it for 100 million, or that was the number published.
Mm.
well, no,
So
they
they
sold all three for
no,
100.
the Rezdy number was 100 million. the others were additional to that, is what I've heard. So they've had a lot of growth. That's a good number.
So
I
I
don't
think
know
it's a
what the
good
plan
move
is though next, but
personally.
obviously if I mean Lawrence Hester's done this before with Fareharbor. He thinks like he thinks that he can do it again, I guess.
You know,
Yeah.
excuse me. Carry on without me for a second.
Yeah, well, I'll say that, regardless of what kind of investment strategy that this is, or what kind of investor, or with a private equity growth capital, Vertica Partners, obviously sophisticated, and with Hester part of it, obviously, Lawrence, he knows he knows this space better than anybody. So, I do think it makes sense. Businesses that at that size require a lot of capital to keep going, and having three different companies trying to source funding to build three very similar technology products that are, in an industry where there's a lot more standards coming in, right? As Magpie is well aware, putting things like Okta in there, and creating more simplicity in that technology. I think it's, being more efficient and having the capital you need to keep growing. They're three great businesses. I've only ever heard good things from their customers. So, it seems like a good move, and ultimately long term, if you bring it all together under one umbrella, or keep them independent and kind of market them differently, I think both of those will be great, as long as what's under the hood gets more efficient. And I can't imagine that it won't, particularly with all the new AI tools that are coming in.
Is there a ruthlessness? Well, the ruthlessness that's associated with PE, do you think, is that just how it is? Is that just accurate? And they are spreadsheet companies because I mean, they're a financial tool, aren't they, really?
You asking Bruce?
Bruce. Yeah,
Well,
Bruce.
I'll give you. I've
From
never had
Bruce's.
the pleasure of working with a PE company, so I can only talk from what I've heard and seen. In that, a PE company will come in, they will cut whatever costs they can to optimize their profitability, and want to sell that company within a 5 to 8 year span. And so get in, cut costs, become profitable, and sell it to the next company. Again, probably another private equity company.
I mean, I think that can be the case. I don't think that's always the case. I mean, look at Exponent, and Big Bus, right? They've been scaling, injecting growth capital into that business for years. It's now in more destinations than ever. They're still growing. They're, the leader by far. They took the industry and blew it up. I mean, Christian, you're super close to this, but I don't have to tell you guys this. But I think that's an example where I don't think you looked around in that business over the time that Exponent's owned it. I believe it may be for sale, or soon should be, just given the timeline of the investment. But they've only grown and prospered over that time, and spend a ton of money. So I think it depends. I think whether you're on the smaller side of private equity, kind of more in the growth capital, they're going to come in and inject you and expect you to spend money, and expect you to see triple digit growth, maybe quarter over quarter or year over year. But yeah, there are out there in the world, there are larger funds that do things that I think are more like what you characterized, Bruce, and particularly in the real estate world, we hear a lot about that. You roll ups that hospitals and dental studios and things, that where there's been a lot of consolidation activity that's been questionable whether that was good for consumers ultimately. But yeah, I think it depends on who it is and what the strategy is.
Sure. I want to go back to this. Is really interesting to me because in the res tech world, the reason Fareharbor is number one is because Lawrence and Max built an incredible sales team, and they just
Absolutely.
went for it. The tech that Fareharbor had and still has compared to their competitive set is probably not that much different, right? It's the sales that made them number one. And they are still far and away number one because of that. Now you've got number two, Rezdy, Checkfront, Regiondo, and they never had the kind of aggressive sales, any of those three, that Fareharbor did. They so far haven't combined anything between their tech or their sales. And their new CEO is a product guy, not a sales guy. Now, if Max is involved, excuse me, if Lawrence is involved, and I don't think he's going to be operational. That's just my guess. I can't imagine Lawrence wants to get operational at this point. But he certainly is going to be pushing on sell, right? And bring on more operators. But we got a product guy. And so is it really more, let's make sure Checkfront, Rezdy, Regiondo has one unified product, which how can they not going forward? Not clear why they wouldn't want one brand once they get that product unified. That's a different question. What do you guys think of that?
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting perspective. Yeah, I didn't think about that kind of the product aspect. I think you're 100% right about FareHarbor were all about sales. They nailed customer service, but they were all about sales and the model. They got the 6% model. I don't know how they did it. I don't know how they persuaded a million operators that 6% was a good idea.
Everyone copied that.
And it's still
they were
there
the first, but
yeah.
everyone else does it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy that worked, but hey,
it's been great for OTAs.
Good for all of them. Yeah, I think that's well. They also had Rezdy had the old model, right? And I think Checkfront had the subscription as well, so they never had the cash to put into sales. So FareHarbor had a really easy ROI. They plowed everyone into sales, paid them a ton of money, and they got that money back immediately or pretty quickly with their 6%. And they executed. And I guess they think they can do it.
They executed great. Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what happens here with the current number 2 and how long, I imagine with this kind of move, they don't, I don't think they have aspirations of passing FareHarbor anytime soon, but they probably want to become that strong number 2. It'll be really
interesting. Do you have any idea about how many subscribers or kind of companies are on the platforms individually?
Paul, I would be a guess. It would be a guess.
A few thousand on FareHarbor, I believe, at least.
Wait. FareHarbor says they have 20,000.
Yeah, but
20. Wow, it's grown a lot.
That includes affiliates, and there's some, there's some.
Well, when you don't pay for your system, right? Because it's a 6%, you can be on FareHarbor, but you're only running a few tours a week, right? Versus if you're paying for a license, you're gonna have a whole different business model. So
makes sense.
You can take that 20,000 with a grain of salt, maybe, but it's even if it was half, it's still well beyond what other people have. Rezdy, Checkfront, Regiondo, I would guess is getting close to 10,000 ballpark. But again,
between them, yeah, I would guess something like that. Yeah.
It's a guess. It's a guess. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to need an acronym or something we can't call it the Rezdy Checkfront Regiondo Company for much longer. I think that's
RCR doesn't work or RRC or
yeah. On the other side of the coin, we got Peak, who hasn't come up in this, but I think they would say they're number 2 or if not number 1.
In terms of clients?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Just saying, throwing it out there, see what sticks.
Yeah, I'm not sure that one would stick.
I think an OTA business volume wise would, well, it depends. If you put like the gateways in there, you get one client that counts for more than the rest combined, right? But I think if you strip those out, I think it would be FareHarbor, this Rezdy conglomerate. I think Ventrata will be 3rd.
Not in number of clients. Again, are we talking revenue?
No, in volume.
They're after the whales, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Dollars. Yeah. All right.
Anchor, of course. You got to make sure to represent. Yeah.
What's that?
And Anchor, of course.
Of course.
Also in the mix, in the hunt.
Well, again, are we talking number of clients or revenue? Because it's a whole different. There's 2 models, right? There is the SMB model of the FareHarbor, Peak, Zola, Treksoft,
Zerv. Oh wait, no.
Zowie, yeah. Right? Versus the enterprise of the Gateway, Ventrata, Accesso, whole Anchor, whole different thing, right?
Yeah, definitely. And scope of the product and scope of the customer. Yeah, totally different.
It's like shouldn't even be the same discussion. Yeah. Putting one company in that discussion, though, that is relevant to this. I'm not sure where the money came from, but the Visit Group up in Sweden, about a month ago, raised $100 million. And they're a super interesting company. They have a product called iTicket, which is their res tech. They've been very active in Scandinavia. They've been active with ski resorts. They're definitely coming to arrival with a big presence to come down into Europe. And start to be really active in Europe. They're super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're
Yeah,
big with the
I do worry
Stroma,
that
right?
we.
So they use Stromas on them. Obviously,
Stroma.
the Scandinavia connection, and that's a big business. So I'm sure they're between that and everything else you mentioned,
Yeah, and for
doing
anyone
well.
out there who doesn't know, Stroma is like the major hop on, hop off bus and boat company in Scandinavia, right? Pretty much.
In Northern
That's
Europe,
two.
Germany too, they have the buses there.
Yeah,
Yeah, Netherlands. Yeah.
yeah.
Netherlands, yeah, canal boats.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of companies, we all go to the same shows sometimes, and I think we end up living in the same circles. And a lot of companies off on the sidelines that don't show up at the shows, so we don't really know much about them. I was talking to an
Yeah,
events company yesterday, and they were asking why events isn't the same as tours and activities, and it's difficult to explain why. It kind of should be, but often it's technology that hasn't pulled the two together, and then we don't go to the same shows, so they go to theirs and we go to ours, and but there's a lot of sort of parallel industries here that we
I think that
probably should
happens
talk
a lot
about
in
more.
I think it happens a lot in the sizing of the or the total addressable market statistics you hear about experiences, and it's like it's a trillion, it's 300 billion. It's like it depends on where you draw on the line. Is it every possible thing you could do? Because yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, if you want to
So
include, like when we come out with our number that's currently around 260 billion dollars, that's tours, activities, attractions primarily. We don't count sporting events, music festivals. Like that's not part of that number. Restaurants. If you put that in, maybe you are
yeah.
getting closer to the $1 trillion number that
Well, the
Jessica just mentioned.
technology behind a lot of that is also kind of starting to overlap, right? So you have so a lot of the event ticketing companies are now kind of getting into the tourism
100%.
or attraction side at least, and then of course that attracts further tourism. Anchor's definitely in that boat, but there's a number of others like that cater to both, and I think we'll see more and more of that. Restaurants too. I think there's a lot of parallels between
Yeah, I mean there
the
are.
technical. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean everything represents an experience, right? So what do we want to call our business of in-destination experiences? Because you could certainly argue restaurants and obviously tickets are. Ticketmaster being
Yeah.
by far the market leader for tickets, has been coming to arrival events for a number of years, and met with them in Orlando, and they're like, finally, we're here for a good reason. Like I was always wanting to understand this business, and now we're in. They
Mm-hmm.
distribute tickets through the OTAs, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
baseball, basketball, music,
Museums, theater. Yeah,
everything.
theater.
So Ticketmaster is in this business now, and that means a lot. It means a real lot.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the Airbnb number is 1.2 trillion, which is great because it's got Airbnb on it as well. So you can put that in any slide deck you want and no one's going to question it. But I think that's all the local stuff. I think it's non-restaurant still, but it's all the local stuff, events included, which obviously is
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah, events
Um,
will definitely turn that number up for sure.
yeah,
Douglas
1.2 is
won't let us talk about events yet. We'll work as far as market size. We do talk about events and how important they are,
yeah,
but he doesn't want to put it in his market sizing yet.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the last story, which isn't really a story yet, it's going to be full of rumors, which are always the
Wait, I don't
best
want to. I want to
stories.
stay on this story. I'm sorry, Christian, because I think we should just chat a little bit about what's next, in terms of roll up acquisition activity, for example,
Mm.
right? Like if a company raises $100 million, whether it was the Rezdy aggregation or Visit Group or XYZ, is part of that allocated towards acquiring some smaller res techs to get market share in different parts of the world that they're not, for example. Um, I mean, how long are we going to go with the same number of res techs in the world versus some aggregation?
Well, I feel like we had this spurt right around the late teens, maybe pre-COVID. All these res techs were getting funded. They were on the normal sort of path. You do a pre-seed, a seed, a A, B, and everyone got to different levels. And then COVID obviously stopped all of that pretty much.
Mm.
But now you get into this point where we're 4 years since COVID, maybe a couple of years before that since you got funded, and the whole the path's gone, right? That there's a sort of timeline on that you're supposed to hit. And and a lot of res techs went and raised 2, 5, 10 million, and they've kind of stalled. And I
Yep.
think if you look behind the scenes at a lot of them, you'd see their numbers have stalled as well. And that's no longer interesting. You got to be growing 50% a year, 100% a year as a startup to be interesting to
Especially to validate
the
those
next
pre-COVID
round.
valuations, and I've heard a
Yeah.
lot of this happening, and not just in tours and activities startups, but really in the startup world in general. I have a lot of friends in the startup world, and funds, people who were in the kind of seed stage or angel stage or even bootstrapped in our business will be fine right now, but for a time they're going to need to raise, and it'll depend on whether the market's there or not in the next few months, or let's say the next 12 months. But Series A folks who raised a couple of years ago, even maybe seed folks out in the world, I think are struggling right now. We saw the news from TripAdmit the other day, John McGuire's company out in Ireland. They're having similar difficulties fundraising right now. They need the cash, and having to face whether they can keep the team together or kind of go independently. Great product. I've seen it and used it. It's very, very interesting. But I think that's the environment we're in, is that things are a little bit tighter, and maybe these types of acquisitions or mergers or roll ups are the path forward for which will be better, as Bruce said. We can't have hundreds of independent local res techs in every region. It doesn't really seem to make sense. It doesn't seem like a long-term solution. So,
well, if you're selling sponsorships to conferences, Stephen, that's exactly what you need, isn't it?
that's true.
Only if they have
More
enough
places to
money.
do conferences.
They have to have enough money. Yeah. But seriously, what about the res techs that have raised, forget seed, like at least 5, 10 plus million? There's a few of those out there.
Oh yeah.
What's their off ramp? Because if you've raised $10 million, or there's some that have raised 20, 30, $40 million, how are they ever going to exit successfully?
Down round and scale. I mean, as we said, there's still a very big market out there. There's a lot of folks still not online. Although I know all of us agree that probably more are online than not. Given the it's tough to measure what exactly we mean by online and those metrics. But I think that the time for for these companies to consolidate is now, and we'll see more of that in the near term.
Yeah, it's tough to see a path out, isn't it? I mean, I always think technology, obviously, and we're not going to turn to AI, but I think that needs to be applied. They need to get super lean and do not twice as much. They need to be doing 10 times more, 100 more with the same people, and scale up and find new avenues that aren't just more operators at 6%. They've got to do more than that to get those valuations back.
And the ones that have raised the most typically are in the US, right? And a number of them are only in the US. So they haven't said, okay, now let's go, because there's opportunity, plenty of more opportunity. Some in Europe. Europe is a more open space than the US. Latin America, wide open space. Asia,
True. Asia, wide open
space, although not as sophisticated from the operator perspective. But there's the DMC market. So there are opportunities, especially outside the US, but it seems like the companies don't really want to go there. It's a lot more complicated, right? With all the taxes and currency.
Well, I think just the payments alone is a mess, right? When you start talking Asia, Europe's obviously got regulations and lots of different local standards.
Yeah,
I think you look at Asia and it's a massive market, yes, but then you look at a place like India, and how many actual operators are there in India? It's a handful. I mean, it's
operators.
Yeah, it's less than probably San Francisco, like big operators that are not DMCs. There
No,
aren't the
because it's
brands.
dominated by DMCs. Yeah.
Yeah, because there aren't the brands in market.
Right.
So, and it's on top of that, working with them and payments and not understanding culture, that's a difficult place to go after, right?
It is. It's going to have to be an Indian company that can open up a res tech in India, I would think. Right. Yeah. Okay.
You finished?
Yeah.
All right. Because we have to talk about Viator.
Speaking of not speaking of consolidation, over to Viator.
Yeah. So this news I think came out last week, right, where they announced, where they announced they're looking at a deal. Not Viator, this is Tripadvisor now, and this is the company that owns voting shares at Tripadvisor, which is called Liberty Tripadvisor, which is complicated, but they own, I think, 57% control. and
No.
20% of the stock.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think 20% of the stock, right?
Yeah. But they have controlling share is the important thing. So TripAdvisor bumped up a fair bit during on that news, and that's all I think we've heard from since. The results were very good last week, especially from Viator. Again, not as they're not growing as fast as they were, but how long can you keep growing at 100%? So then the rumors are, and we talked about this maybe a year ago, does Viator get spun off? And this has been the rumor for more than a year, right? It's been a few
Oh
years.
yeah, 2 years. Yeah. We've talked about it on previous podcasts.
Yeah, I think
Speculating.
pre-COVID. Yeah.
So that's it. That's
But when that news came out
out
about
there.
TripAdvisor, Viator wasn't even mentioned, right?
No.
That wasn't part of the news, even though, correct me if I'm wrong, Viator is the most profitable segment of TripAdvisor right now, right?
Fastest growing.
You're
I'm
wrong.
not sure if that's
You're wrong.
yeah. No.
Okay.
I think it's the fastest growing segment. I think the profitable still ads.
They said they broke even last quarter, and they'll
Yeah,
be profitable
they
this
probably
year.
make a ton of money on ads still. Just don't talk to us about the hotel meta search, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How's the subscription going?
Yeah.
So speculate. But
the news was it was an SPV, right? So they're putting up a vehicle in order to theoretically split something off. We don't know what the thing is. It could be OpenTable, could be the fork. Who knows? But yeah, it could be
OpenTable because they don't own OpenTable, but the fork, yeah.
Right.
The fork. Yeah, that's what I meant.
But I think the assumption
I get the big ones confused. Didn't they used to be part of Expedia? Sorry.
The assumption is that they will go private, right? This is a private equity. That's the kind of thing that happens, I think, and it'll no longer be a public company.
TripAdvisor is. It's a private equity company. The Liberty coming from Liberty Media, right?
It's a public company now, so I think the assumption is they would go to private equity. Some private equity companies come along with a checkbook,
right?
And says we'll take it private.
Yeah.
Then we're talking the same discussion we had earlier, but with lots of zeros on the end. Is do they then slash, spin off, do this, do that? Not necessarily. I mean, they could keep it whole and build and sell later, but
I mean, because if what they do is go private, lots of companies have done that. Like Travelport has done that a number of times. Cvent. I'm just talking, companies in our world. Business as usual too, right? Like being a public company compared to being owned by private equity doesn't change unless the private equity company decides to change, or like you said, sell off assets.
Well, Stephen's going to have to be careful what he says here, but that's my point. Is I think it is different. The private equity company, you don't take a company private just for fun because you feel like it. Public company is a good way to run a company. You have access to funds, and it's a good place to be. If you're taking it private, it's for a reason, because you think you can take this, grow it, split it, whatever you're doing. There's a plan, right? So you don't just continue as normal. Then what's the point in taking it private, and why come in there in the first place? So
well, you got to ask Elon Musk that, right? He's the most high profile example of that in recent times. But yeah, I mean, I think different owners are going to have deploy a different strategy, and so whenever there's a change like that, if they're going to spin it off independently and publicly, it's probably a good thing. They probably see the opportunity. If it's Viator, they think that it'll raise a lot of money. There'll be a lot of excitement about it because it's on a rocket ship path, and TripAdvisor Core makes a ton of money. They can reinvest in what they want to do more of, which is presumably what they're making the most money on, ads. Viator is a rocket ship of growth, but at a break even, or often, negative, it's not doing as much as it could inside as it could, raise a lot of cash for TripAdvisor to deploy more. So, I think it's a very good speculation. But we'll see.
Good speculation.
We'll see.
Have we heard about what TripAdvisor's plan is? They got the new CEO. I don't think it's a social network. I don't think it's subscription. But have we heard anything about what it is, or speculation?
It's going to become an AI tool, right? I mean, it seems like the only obvious direction right now.
Trip planner.
Unless they're going to do crypto, I think it's gonna.
Well, I did hear him speak at the Focusrite conference in November, and not a lot of detail. He did talk about their AI trip planning tool.
Yep.
So yes, that was part of it. Not sure they make money on that, but that's for another day. He talked about Viator and how successful they are right now. Didn't hear much else though. I think he's still fairly new, trying to figure it out. I mean, they're still one of the top three as far as traffic in the travel industry. Is that right? I mean, they're certainly in the top
I think they're
five.
top on traffic, aren't they? I don't
Are they
know.
number one for traffic
I'm
above
not sure
Expedia
how
booking?
booking. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have that as that asset, which is why advertising probably is still their cash cow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they still have the traffic and organic traffic, although, obviously the reliance on Google and the positioning of Google in the space has been impactful on all those companies you mentioned. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm mid-article right now. I'm writing about Google Travel and Gemini as part of that, and I think that traffic is at huge risk. I'm not
and maybe
sure how
that's why
much
it's a good
value
time
they're
to
adding.
monetize Viator, while we're speculating. If you think
Yeah.
that game is going to be difficult to play and keep paying for traffic for all the OTAs who are, heavily reliant on paid ads, that, they're kind of stuck in that cycle. And maybe, it gets more difficult to compete as Google gets more and more into the space. But yeah, you've done a lot of writing and talking about that in videos.
Well,
Well, is that why
I think the
both Get Your
paid.
Guide and Viator are spending a lot of money on TV ads, building brand,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Google, Get Your Guide, we've heard Johannes talk about how he really doesn't love giving all his money to Google, but he had to do it. And now he's giving all his money to TV networks. Not all his money, he's got a lot of it. But, they were on the NFL playoffs. They were on the Grammys.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be in March Madness. I mean, they're buying premier ad time because they want to build that US market and build a brand, which is really different and will be really interesting to see how they are successful with that.
And they have been more conservative on their ad strategy, just from, I can see it anecdotally and talking to their operators. Their seasonality has changed dramatically from pre-COVID. And they've said that, they're kind of more conservative in the low season, and they seem to be redeploying that money in a smart way to build the brand, because frankly, that's the thing that they struggle against Viator with. Viator has the luxury of, decade plus on them, and a lot of recognition, consumer awareness about Viator, particularly in the US.
I was going to say in
But
the
really,
US, Stephen, right? I mean, I'm
particularly,
not sure
yeah,
that holds true in Europe.
not so much in Europe, but the US spend is considerably more. So, I think that's what they're trying to get, is catch up on that front, and then who
Absolutely.
knows?
Yeah.
My prediction is they will spin off Viator and they'll spin off the fork, and then in about 3 years there'll be new leadership everywhere, and someone will wake up and say, "Why don't we merge TripAdvisor and Viator? They'd be such a good partnership." And then we'll go through it again.
Or maybe the cash raised for TripAdvisor, or for Viator, when they spin off, is enough to buy Get Your Guide, and now we're all happy under one roof.
That's been the other rumor.
You
Yeah,
heard it here.
yeah. All
Say
So
all
right.
the names at once.
Viator is spun off and then they acquire Rezdy check front, Regiondo and vertically integrate.
We all live happily ever after. The
Don't they
other
already have Boken? I think
They have
that's
both.
yeah.
True. Yeah. Yeah.
The other news today is Booking did a Booking's prediction on this year in travel wasn't particularly good. I think it was just below expectations. I think they said 7% up, which actually for most people would be probably fine. I think for most
Yeah,
operators.
considering last year was such a banner year for so much of tourism was booming last year.
Yeah, so I think probably stabilization flat is probably actually fine, right? As long as it's there or thereabouts. But Booking's stock price didn't do too well today.
Yeah. When
Yeah.
you're public, you got to keep growing. Well, when you're a company, private equity, public, VC, there's certain targets you just got to keep hitting,
Yeah,
right?
there's no choice.
When you're
Yeah,
a little old company like us or you Christian,
yeah.
it's a different story.
All right, we're gonna end in a minute here before I start talking about like Gemini and AI and all that good stuff, which I
We
Appreciate
could
always have
easily
time
do.
for that. There's
Yeah,
always room for AI in every
I
conversation.
I'm really close now to probably Gemini being my go-to
No way.
Gen AI. Yeah,
Haven't used it.
it's
That's
it,
Bard 2.0, right?
Yeah, exactly. When it
It's a
works, it's
pretty
really
slick
good. But
phone app
does,
that you can use it for.
yeah, I can't get my phone app to work. I've got the wrong Google account on the wrong thing, and my Google account's all over the place.
So
But
we do have at Arrival Emmanuel Moreau, I believe this
mhm.
pronunciation, who was head of Google Things to Do the last few years, is
Oh,
now head of AI for Google Travel. That's his new
Oh
role.
wow.
Yeah, and he'll be speaking at Arrival on Sunday. So
yeah, I
don't miss.
saw that. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah,
It should be good.
we'll see what he can say, what he can tell us. He's
Yeah,
great. Yeah, he's usually more open than a typical public company speaker. So hopefully he'll be great and tell us what they're up to.
yeah,
Absolutely. And we heard some interesting things from the guys at the AI summit yesterday from Travel Trends.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening in, by the way, Christian.
yeah, yeah. That was a good conference.
All right. Shout out to
Yeah,
Dan Christian and Travel
yeah.
Trends and
Yeah,
the great
They did some
podcast
great stuff.
Dan does. He does great podcast, and that was an awesome the first travel summit, AI event. And Dan's great. I mean, he kicked ass on that for sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right, that's it for
lots of
now,
good
I
stuff.
think, guys. I will see both of you in Berlin in a few days for Arrival and maybe ITB as well. I'm not sure who's staying for that, but
Yeah. That's where I can have meetings. I can't have meetings at Arrival. I'm a little busy.
Right.
yeah,
You're running around.
Yeah, my meetings
Yeah,
are
I
ITV
did
Tuesday,
10 years
Wednesday.
in a row of ITB, and I think that my days at Mesa are
Are
over.
done.
You guys
yeah.
have
You
fun
need
over
to be
there.
a
It's such a pleasant conference center. Yeah.
you need to be a training for that before you go to that one. So, all right. Well, thanks for
I'll do
participating.
it virtually through a headset. That's
Yeah,
what
you
I'd
got
like
all
to
your
do.
goggles.
You got all the goggles here.
Stephen, thanks for joining us. Busy
Hey,
time
my
for you,
pleasure.
I'm
See you
sure.
next time.
It's
Just
probably time for
Yeah.
your New York Times interview next. And
just 45 minutes of gossip. That's all we just did, guys. Congratulations.
all
All
right.
right, we got it.
All right.
Thanks a
Thanks
Thanks,
a lot.
lot.
guys.
Anytime.
Okay. See ya.